Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
Want awesome health? How about doubling your energy? With our free Awesome Health course, you can get a new video and lesson every single day for 84 straight days. The course covers everything from optimizing your digestion, nutrient intake, correct health issues, including weight, skin, energy, immune system, and so much more. The course could easily be worth $200 or $300 for, and yet it's 100% free when you go to bioptimizer.com. That's bioptimizers.com. Once you're there, just enter your name and email to get the first 3 phases of the Bioptimization report. You'll get the report immediately and begin getting your video lessons each and every day from there on in.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we are going to be talking about metabolism, chronic diseases, aging, and exogenous ketones. And our guest today is Dr. Latt Mansor. He is a world expert in physiology and metabolism and consults with elite sport, military, clinical, and research organizations. His interest in diabetes and cardiovascular disease stemmed from the high prevalence of those diseases in both his parents' families. He then developed interest in metabolism and exercise during his undergraduate years as he created a mathematical model of adipose tissue fat metabolism for his final year project. That's very interesting. Along his journey of acquiring more knowledge on metabolic health and physiology, he started applying his findings in his daily life to strive for better health and to prove that genetic disposition to chronic diseases is not the entire equation. Dr. Mansor is the research lead at HVMN, that's Health Via Modern Nutrition, and his current project focuses on operator performance in hypoxia, low oxygen environments, which has applications for soldier performance at altitude in mountains on fighter jets and potentially one day in space. And of course, in 2017, HVMN was the first to launch Ketone 1.0, a drinkable ketone to the public. And Ketone IQ, which I just had some recently, is a second generation of drinkable ketones launched by HVMN on January 13th, 2022, the wait list of over 33,000 people. Wow, that's crazy. Dr. Mansor, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
So we ran into each other not that long ago at the Metabolic Health Summit, which for those who are not familiar with it, it's kind of like Geek Fest for scientific researchers to kind of come out of the closets and out of the research labs to get together and share cutting edge science.
I feel very called out.
Yeah. And we bumped into each other and he shared with us this product, Keto IQ, which is really interesting, exogenous ketones. But let's get a little bit into your backstory, particularly this whole component on the mathematical model on adipose tissue. Okay, right. What do you mean by a mathematical model? Like too many inches is too bad? Or
So at that point, believe it or not, me being undergrad and, during undergrad days, we all want an easy out. We all want to get good grades, but without too much work, right? So we had a list of projects to choose from. And most of them, I was doing biotechnology, bachelor's in biotechnology. We've got a list of projects. So most of them are actually lab work. So then I saw this project and I was like, this project doesn't require me to go into the lab. So that means I don't have to spend that much time in the lab and I can still qualify for the final year project. It's a mathematical modeling project of adipose tissue metabolism, i.e. fat metabolism. Didn't know what that was. I was like, that sounds cool. That sounds novel. That sounds like interdisciplinary work, which I was really interested in because it was not just physiology. It was not just metabolism. It was also mathematics. It was computer. It was in silico. So then later on, the more I dwell into it, the more I looked into it, the more I realized how complicated it is. Because I have to first understand fat metabolism thoroughly, and then I have to understand mathematical models. How does mathematical model translate into biological pathways? So creating that, and I created a model that, if I can remember correctly, has been a while now. I create a model where it simulates if you have perturbation of activity of basal metabolic rate. So I think I use basal metabolic rate and activity as the variable that increases or decreases adipose tissue metabolism.
And
So
how accurate was this model?
Undergrad standard. I don't know. We haven't really tested it. I did get first class honors on it, so I assume it wasn't that bad. My presentation and all that, I got a first class honors on that project, so I was happy with it. It was I looked at, you know, overall over sort of basal metabolic rate decrease over time as you age, or even like you decrease like
Extended calorie deficit, for example, right?
Yeah, fat and fast.
Is there a model for that? Like, can you predict how much the rate of decline is going to be?
There is always model for everything, right?
Yeah.
And the problem is the accuracy with it. And we can always play around with data. We can always create an algorithm to predict a certain thing. But ultimately, metabolism is so complicated that it's not just one thing. For example, you know, fat metabolism, for example, like what I said, right? Even if I can predict that you can lose X percentage of fat in this amount of time, given this amount of activity, there are other things in the pipeline as well. Like, what about your insulin? What about your hormones? What about your body adapting to your new body weight and having that inclination to actually hold on to the fat as storage so that you don't lose too much weight too fast? You see, like, there's so many dimensions to physiology and metabolism. And this is what I learned further on in my academic career, in my PhD, is that everything is in balance. And as soon as you tip the balance, the other things will start compensating it, will start to compensate the pathways, the equilibriums, and the hormones, the enzymes turn on and off and switch up and down. Everything will go haywire. And that's what ultimately drives chronic disease, when you have an imbalance for too long, chronic imbalance and chronic dysfunction, and therefore your body can't compensate it any longer. Your body can't fix it anymore, and you go to a state where the symptoms get amplified and you get diagnosed for, you know, for certain chronic diseases.
That's, you know, I've been in the art of, not the science, the art of metabolism and helping people achieve ideal levels of body fat. And what's fascinating is what is cultivated inside of, if you look at, say, where my history is, bodybuilding industry, virtually everybody gets into shape. Now, maybe not by the standards of a bodybuilder. You know, there's a wide extreme range, and I would say they move to the end where they're really trying to overcome some of these kind of adaptive biological mechanisms in order to offset. And that'd be fun to understand the mathematics of it, because, for example, my coach developed a thing with caloric cycling, which you call the cycle diet, which let's say you're running 1,000 calorie deficit, 500 on metabolic rate, 500 from activity over an extended period of time. There comes a point where you just stop losing weight.
Yeah.
You get stuck in what he would end up doing is taking people through basically one day where you would spike your calories from maybe 2,000 calories to like 8,000, to like as much as you could eat, like just, and hormonally you couldn't adapt into fat metabolism, but it would throw on all of these triggers. And he learned this by studying of all the eating contest winners. So how they would preemptively starve themselves in strategic ways before they went to the eating contest, and then we'd eat all this food. They weren't obese. The best eating contest winners were not obese people, and they were using these mechanisms, and he began to kind of work out the patterns of it. And I've been using that with great success for many years. So it isn't just calories in, calories out, exercise in, exercise out. So these are very complex models.
Exactly. And I was at KetoCon a couple of weeks ago, and Dr. Pompa gave a presentation on feast and famine cycle. So essentially what you just said, so his research and knowledge is around the change of the microbiome, on how cycling our eating habit is what's going to force our body to adapt and create results. So instead of, for example, instead of going a ketogenic diet forever, you go on ketogenic diet for a few months, cycle it out, and then switch it back. And he said, so many people try different diets, paleo diet, keto diet, and they say, oh, I tried keto diet. It really changed my life. I really feel the results. And he said, I'm sure you do. Same thing with any diet. It's just any change is a stress stimulus to the body. And as your body reacts to the stress stimulus, adapts and gets stronger, that's where the results is most pronounced. And that's why, people ask, you to work out, to change your exercise routine every now and again, change your diet every now and again. And that's exactly why. It's so that our bodies are so good at adapting that its default mode is to be stagnant, is to be in the comfort zone. I'm happy now. I'm happy here. Do not change me. Do not make any changes. I am metabolizing as in a very happy state. And let's keep it that way. So if you change it, it will try to pull it back into the original state until you tell the body, it's like, no, this is your new state now. And therefore your body has to adapt.
What do you think is the factors that are driving that kind of stabilization mechanism in the human body? What do you attribute that to?
I think it's the most basic instinct of evolutionarily built up survival skills, because you don't want to stress your body out too much. Your body, want to be in a comfortable, productive environment, because you have to pass on your genes. So that's your optimal, that's the main goal, right? To survive and pass on your genes. Anything other than that, like the body is not, like, it doesn't evolutionarily say that you have to have six-pack. You have to look attractive. You have to, be super smart. You have to, get a Nobel Prize, right? You're smart enough to survive, and you're smart enough and live long enough to reproduce. That's basic sort of physiological instinct. So I think that's what's driving the inertia of wanting to be in this comfort zone and homeostasis and balance. But now that we know more about human body and the human mind, we can then train our body to get used to the new state of balance, which we want. Whatever state of balance that you want either, a more meditative, like yoga and like Zen state. You want the more like bodybuilder, that state. Like, we can now choose and train our bodies to get into that state and make that the new default state.
So what you're outlining is, what is the performance parameters that you feel most beneficial for your chosen path in life, and then engaging in a process that would allow you to optimize the body's functions and metabolic rate or brain state, etc. Exactly. What are some of the things that you've been able to discover along that line? Because I'm fascinated with this this oxygen. I don't want to interrupt because you might have had some ideas, but some low oxygen environment adaptations, and of course that'll probably lead to ketones. But
what I've learned personally, or what I've learned throughout my sort of career?
Both.
I think in general, what I've learned is that the longer you put your body through that new state that you want to be in, the more likely your body wants to stay in there.
I agree with that. That's enough.
So you're really fit.
What's the length of time that you find that that makes the new set point? Have you noticed?
I think that's more of a question for you, Wade.
Because I noticed about 18 months.
18 months.
18
Yeah,
months. So for if people, let's say they lose 20 pounds.
Yeah.
And they can stay with that routine for 18 months. That seems to reset the weight, the set point of their weight at that level.
Got it. Yeah. I was plateauing for about 12 months. So I would say almost there. I lost weight. I lost about 20 pounds during COVID from June last year to January this year.
That's like losing 40 in a normal world, right?
Yeah. Well,
everybody went the other way, I think.
Yeah, and then
almost 30 pounds is the average weight.
From January till now, I was stagnant for a bit. So now I understand. And then now I changed my routine, and then suddenly I'm seeing results again. So yeah, I think 18 months sounds logical, sounds rational. I think you definitely have more experience in terms of the practical training, because no study is going to be like, let's check how long would it take for you to change, right? I think some studies may sort of say 3 months if you change your diet, but then you have to think about, okay, you do get a change, but how sustainable is the change, right? So,
and is the change too extreme?
Correct, because if it's too extreme, your body will want to go back, and it'll be detrimental. So that's more of a general lesson I've learned from that. But more on like a personal or career. I think I'll talk about what I recently learned. What I recently learned is that we live in a superficial society, and we always focus on body. Not many people focus on mind. And when I talk about mind in my previous lives in academic world, I think about intelligence. I think about book smart. I think about, being able to be coherent and be able to explain complicated scientific concepts in a simplified form. But that's not at all. It's about just simply your mind stability, emotional stability, as well as that interactiveness with people as well, the relationships with people. That often gets looked over, compared to body dysmorphia, for example. Like, people want to look good. They don't care, like, if they connect well with people, or if they, their mind is not in the right place. And I think that's also one of the reasons why a lot of mental health issues come about, right? When you face with certain triggers, certain changes, certain stress markers, like we talked about, certain stimulus, right? Your body is ready to cope with it because we have been training our bodies. But if your mind is not trained to cope with such stress, that's when it shuts down. That's when it goes into overdrive mode. That's when it goes to overwork mode. And you end up going from sort of emotional stress manifesting into physiological symptoms.
Makes sense. What are some of the things that you're discovering in hypoxia, low oxygen environments, and its relation to ketones?
That's a great question. I presented at MHS, the Metabolic Health Summit. Because we had a $6 million contract with the DoD looking at exogenous ketones in cognitive and physical performance in hypoxia. So this is really relevant for military personnel, operators up in high altitude, deep sea exploration, and potentially even space exploration, right? When you have low oxygen.
Because if I understand correctly, the original research started getting done because they were using pure oxygen underwater, where they didn't create bubbles that would give way to special forces operators happening. And then they were taking strokes, and then they started using ketones as a way to kind of keep them going. But then it has applications in low oxygen environments, is what you're saying. Yeah. So what's the difference between those two?
So I think the original rationale of ketones is essentially, ketone is like any other substrates, like glucose or fat or proteins. It is metabolized and to produce energy, to produce ATP, right? And what we know of ketone is that ketone goes into the brain. It can bypass the blood-brain barrier, unlike fatty acids. and provide the brain with energy. On that premise, we know that the brain consumes huge amount of energy in proportion to our body energy expenditure, and energy consumption. And that means our brain just needs that much more source of energy or fuel, if you would. So ketone seems to be a very good preferred fuel of the brain. So we got that. And then we know that since respiration and the production of ATP uses oxygen as the end carrier in oxidative phosphorylation to produce energy, oxygen is super important. And when you're in low oxygen environment, i.e., high altitude, your cognitive ability drops significantly. So we wanted to see if ketones, being the preferred fuel of the brain, will that have any effect on the cognitive decline based on the hypoxic environment?
Right. What did you find?
So that was the first phase, which was the proof of concept. So we saw a steady decline of cognitive performance in hypoxia, but in the ketone group, it sort of flattens out. So it got mitigated. And that was enough for DoD to say, like, this looks promising, and let's run a bigger study, phase 2, and have a bigger cohort of people, different tasks, including a task looking at flavor, because ketone, for that project, we're using ketone ester. And by nature, the ketone ester is very, very bitter. So we had a whole separate task looking at...
Bitter is a kind word.
That is a kind word.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think the original stuff, they called it like burnt rubber and jet fuel.
Rocket fuel,
yeah,
battery acid. We've got... people are very creative.
Yeah.
But yes.
Why is it so strong? Why is almost everything for the brain tastes bad?
I don't know if...
Like most nootropic substances, most brain stimulation, most chemical agents that affect the brain have there's a kind of like, I call it the brain taste. I know
the brain taste.
Yeah, it's something. It's a bit almost. I don't know what I would call it. It's a unique thing that I'm like, oh, this is working on my brain. As soon as I have it,
I never thought about it like that. Actually, I never did.
Well, I'm very unsophisticated in my thinking, so.
But I mean, you might be onto something, and maybe you might be able to discover some new compounds just by tasting them. It's like, that's a little, it tastes like it will help my brain,
Well, I mean, you could go with ethnobotanicals, you can do with cognitive enhancers, you can do with various types of stimulants, you can do it with ketones, and they all have a recognizable, I don't know what the flavor is. It's not like bitter. It's kind of bitter, but there's a unique, there's
an aftertaste as well.
Yeah, it's distinct, and it's like, oh, this is working on my brain.
Yeah, I mean, I presented the results of the flavor study as well, and they used sucrose and sucralose to try and mask the bitterness. Not only did it not work, so the amount of sucrose that they used was equivalent to 4 cans of Coke.
Oh my God.
And 7 cans of Coke. And then the amount of sucralose they used was equivalent to 4 cans of Diet Coke.
Oh my God.
Not only the sweetness did not work, the ketone ester actually suppressed the sweetness. So basically, so if you ask people to taste it, and then they have to rate the taste on the scale, and before tasting the ketone ester, they would rate, sweetness way higher than other tastes like savory, astringent, bitterness, and all that. And after they were introduced with ketone ester, like the scale of the sweetness literally dropped to almost 0, and only bitterness went up.
Wow, that's
that's one of the big reasons why we came up with Ketone IQ, which is R13-butanediol, which is half of what ketone ester is. Ketone ester is BHB, beta-hydroxybutyrate, esterified with butanediol. And we just took half of it, which is butanediol, and it gets converted into BHB by your liver. And it's in that sense, it's a slow releasing sort of process, but it also gets you to the high level enough blood BHB to get the benefits. And on top of that, you are not going to be afraid of going too high of blood BHB level, because previously, like say 3-4 years ago, we thought higher BHB, the better.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently that's not the case, because a study came out showing that going from 0.0 to 2 millimolar, the oxidation rate of ketones did increase significantly. But going from 2 to 4, that oxidation rate actually doesn't increase as much. And then on top of that, this other paper showed for in athletes while they are exercising, because of the too high blood BHB level, and BHB, beta hydroxybutyrate, is an acid. So it drops your blood pH and it increases acidity. And when you increase acidity, your heart rate increases, your breathing increases, because it wants to accelerate that elimination of acid via carbon dioxide.
Right.
So you get the feeling that you're working out harder, which is the higher rate of perceived exertion, without the improvement in performance.
Oh, it's interesting. So that's the perception of effort versus the
RPE, rate
versus the output,
exertion,
which is very important. So you think, oh man, I had a great workout, and you're like, wow, 2 minutes slower on my time or whatever.
Correct.
Or I lifted less, or was it? That's very interesting, because I think this is one of the things that I think is where the nuance is in high performance training, is the difference between data, performance, output, and then the metabolism or energetic mechanics behind that. And they're not all concordant with each other. So for example, I'll give another example for our listeners who are fascinated with this. If you do, say, one high intensity session a week, there seems to be a benefit. At 2, it can be problematic. And usually if you're doing more than 2 in a dieting phase, it's counteractive, because your capability of responding in a positive manner to too much stimulation. So it's like the Goldilocks principle, right? Like, where do we find the right amount? And that's an ongoing research, and it's going to vary from person to person with whatever's going on with that, right? So when you developed the Ketone IQ, by the way, I've had the product. It's great. It tastes better than most of the keto product. So the ketone product, that's a big bonus.
I mean, it's not juice kind of level, but it tastes better.
I took it on one of my fasting days not that long ago, and it was definitive in its energy production. I've got good handle of where I'm at on a fasting day, and I was like, oh, that stuff actually works.
Yeah.
How did you come about developing that particular product?
The Bioptimizer mission is to help more of the world fix their digestion at a core level. The truth is, your digestion is only as good as your enzyme levels. Imagine trying to build a house with a tree. It's impossible. You need to chop the tree down into small pieces. Similarly, in order for your food to be used by your body, it must be broken down into a bioavailable form. And that's what enzymes do, converting protein into amino acids, fats into specific fatty acids, and carbohydrates into usable energy units. We start out with an abundance of enzymes, and that's why kids can digest just about anything really quickly. The thing is cooking food kills enzymes, as they cannot survive at temperatures above 118 degrees. So years of this ends up depleting our bodies and leads to weak digestion. Taking digestive enzymes like Masszymes, which has an incredibly high level of protease for digesting protein, as well as other critical enzymes like lipase, amylase, and others, is a total game changer. Suddenly, you strengthen your digestion, eliminate gas and bloating, boost metabolism, and multiply your energy. Most importantly, you fix your digestion at a core level. To get started with Masszymes and to save 10% on your first order, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com, and use the code MASS10, MASS10.
Well, we did launch the first drinkable ketone, which was ketone ester, and we were already running the DoD.
Before you do that, can you explain the difference between Ketone IQ, ketone esters, keto salts for people?
Sure. So as I explained earlier, ketone ester is BHB bound to butanediol in an ester bond. So that's ketone ester. Ketone IQ, we just took half of it, which is butanediol only. So R1,3-butanediol is what ketone IQ is. How ketone ester gets metabolized is that when you ingest it in your gut, esterase will cleave it into half so that you get the BHB directly into your blood, and the BDO, which is butanediol, goes to your liver and gets converted into BHB, and that's why you get that prolonged ketosis. So we figured with the price and taste profile and everything, we could do the same with just butanediol. So why not, right? A lot of people are coming out with all these different proprietary patented products, molecule, which does the same thing, increase blood BHB level. What I always pitch is like, regardless of the means, find the best product that can elevate your blood ketone levels to the Goldilocks zone. Not higher, the better, but to the Goldilocks zone for your use case, right? And people are just too, so I got an email the other day asking, why don't these companies just merge and make the best product? I said, well, it all comes down to driven by greed and money and who wants to own everything, and that's the problem. And I'm just a scientist here. My goal of doing science is to be able to impart all this knowledge and data and with high scientific integrity to the public so that they can make informed decision. Because I'm not selling you anything. Like, I want you to go out there, experiment, no one knows your body better than you do.
That's right.
So you will know what works for your body. So that's ketone ester and ketone IQ. Ketone salt has been around even way longer. It's essentially beta hydroxybutyrate bound with a salt, either sodium, potassium, or magnesium. So that's ketone salt. The problem with ketone salt is that it's limited by the amount that you can take in because of the salt load. And because of the salt load, you also get GI issues if you have it too high. Now, the issue with not being able to take in a huge amount of ketone salt also impact your blood BHB level negatively because you can't raise it above, say, 1. And for therapeutic users, some researchers says 1 is enough to get cognitive benefit and whatnot. But if you're using it for performance, or even in some cases you need 2 millimolar, then that may not be sufficient.
What is the Goldilocks range as a general performance enhancement? So let's say you're a runner versus, say, someone on weights versus someone at altitude. Are there variances there?
Yeah, I think the general consensus is 2 is the cutoff point. The 2 is the threshold. But if I would give a range, I would give range between 1.5 to 2.5. And then if it's therapeutic, I would go from 1 to 2.5. So, that's the range that I would aim for general, and for performance, anything 2 and above, but not going into the 3 to 5. That would be good because you don't want the blood acidity. What
some of the things that you would feel if you're too high or too low?
If it's too high, some people, so in our study with the military, when they reach about 6, 7, there are some cases where they reach too high. They don't feel well. They just generally, just feel unwell, even though they are performing, they're doing their thing. It's just that not good feeling.
Yeah.
If it's too little, you just don't feel anything.
Right.
So, so that's to answer your question. But back to the first question you asked, how do we come about this product? Why we decide to do it? Just 3 reasons. 1 is it works as well, and 2, the cost is much cheaper. It goes from $33 per 25 grams to $10 per 25 grams now. And then the taste. It's as simple as that, because ultimately we want this not to be just elite athlete military fuel. This is something that everyone should have access to because it's beneficial to human beings in general. So if we want to make it accessible to everyone else, especially for people who are not in this area, who do not know much about ketones, why would they take something that tastes bad and pay so much money for it, right? If they don't know the science behind it, if they don't know the benefits behind it, it's just very difficult to make a business out of it. But ultimately, it's also very difficult for people to get educated if they're not even open to trying it.
So with your organization, HV MN, health via modern nutrition. What's the mission, the goal, like you're working as a researcher for them? Can you tell us a little bit about that work?
Sure. So health via modern nutrition, and the modern nutrition that we mean is not the current nutrition that everyone is on, and that is like USDA, FDA suggestions and recommendations. It's something that we should strive for to prevent chronic diseases, to really live healthily in the present, but also live healthily as we age. So promoting that healthy lifestyle, but at the same time, arming people with the knowledge, the education, and the product that they need in order to achieve that. Because what we know is that overconsumption of sugar can cause chronic elevation of insulin, and that can cause chronic inflammation and chronic diseases progressions. Let's start with that. Let's start with having lower sugar. Let's start with, replacing your sugar calories with healthy fats or with ketones, for example. And then let's start with that. And then you learn more about ketones. Okay, what about different lifestyles that promote endogenous ketone, which means ketones that we make in our own bodies? So ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting, those kind of lifestyle. If not, if you're an athlete and you're not on ketogenic diet, how do you improve performance? Now we're moving away from the disease population spectrum to the other end, where I want to be faster, stronger. I want to be, achieve my PR. And that is also another area where we can provide that knowledge and information and product to your use cases, like to fit your use case and to fit your goals.
What are, so let's say I'm running marathons, okay? And, I can run your average marathon in say 4 hours, and I take so much. So where would something like Ketone IQ come in as performance augmentation, and what might I expect from trying that?
So a lot of endurance athletes, this month has been Tour de France month, so a lot of cyclists. Our CEO, Michael Brand, was just on Lance Armstrong's podcast talking about ketones. So you can take it, and I always tell people this: ketones, especially exogenous ketones, are not meant to substitute your existing nutritional strategy. If you're already taking your goo gel or whatever, your sugar and your replenishment or your banana, keep doing that, but add ketones on top of that. That way you are giving yourself a hybrid system where you can burn glucose or ketones. Your body will choose on its own. And what it does is that research has shown that it spares your glycogen, which means you have a tank that can last longer in the race. So that's how people feel, and that's how people describe it. It's like, I run the same amount as I did yesterday without ketones, but today with ketones, I feel like I can go further.
That's been my anecdotal experience. So I get up in the morning and I'll go for a run. And if I add the Ketone IQ in, I notice it just seems two things. One, I'm able to maintain nose breathing for a longer period of time. And it feels like it's easier to run an extended amount of time as opposed to when I don't. And that's in a fasted state. And I'm not on a ketogenic diet, but when I tested it in my own experience, I was like, oh, okay, I actually got a performance benefit here. Yeah.
I think a lot of our loyal customers, they are only loyal because they know that they personally felt it. I use it before my weightlifting sessions. Granted, it's different than endurance, different than a race, or different than a run. I do feel that it puts my headspace in the right zone. So I feel more focused, and I'm not like wandering around and not focusing on my form. And when you lift heavy, you always have to consciously be aware of your form and all that. And that is what I use it for. But most importantly, what I use it for is for recovery, because a study shown that if you have ketones with carbs and protein after workout and before sleep, they did it for 3 weeks. And at the end of the 3rd week, the athletes actually had 15% improved work output. So they could do more. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
And they could do more, but and that's also reflected with increased calorie intake. So they're eating more and they're doing more and they're being more productive. And this is very interesting because in general, we say ketone IQ does have a mild appetite suppression effect.
Yep.
And that's why people use it for fasting, especially if they're not fasting for autophagy. So they don't need to fast up to 24, 36 hours. They can use ketone IQ to prolong that fasting period because of appetite suppression. But in this study, it shows an increase in calories. So the only explanation I can think of is that ketone is essentially an adaptive fuel, an adaptive substrate that provides your body with energy, but also adapts to what stimulus that you give your body. So if you're training hard and trying to up your training every week, then ketone may actually, increase your appetite. We need to find out. I mean, we still need to investigate that in a study, but that could be a hypothesis. And if you are fasting, you are depleting your body of glycogen and depleting your body of storage, and you have ketones, and it helps you with appetite suppression.
Where is your research taking you now that you've been working on these models, and what have you? Where is this going?
So my current active research that I'm overseeing is the military work in hypoxia. So that is sort of coming to a close, hopefully end of this year, and presenting it to Special Command. So that's the biggest part of my job. There's also another study that we sponsor at University of North Georgia, and we essentially wanted to replicate the effect of ketone ester in cognitive and physical performance, but by using ketone IQ. So we put them on a 5K run, we put them on a wing gait, and then we measure their cognitive performance. And that's, after they take ketone IQ. And during that study as well, the week leading to the test day, they were also giving ketone IQ and before bed. And we want to measure the sleep quality and HRV and all that. So those 2 studies are ongoing. And then upcoming study, we are hopefully applying for a grant together with Washington State University, looking at using ketones to minimize sleep cycle and maximize awake cycle for the military. So if you're sleeping less, you're awake more, obviously you're more productive, but also we want to make sure that those wake times, you are also quite alert. You're not like just dozing off, right? You need to be productive. So we're looking at, writing our grant to look at what effect would that have on these soldiers. And then another grant that we are going to apply later this year is looking at traumatic brain injury. So with Naval Health Research Center in San Diego, we are hopefully going to apply for a grant to look at translational medicine, translational clinical trials, using ketone as a form of mitigation or a form of recovery intervention for people who have had traumatic brain injury.
Fascinating. The keto world is opening up all kinds of interesting doors. It's fascinating too how much interest is in military operations around this. Overall, what would you say, I want to drive in particularly with ketone IQ, the average person who's maybe working out, trying to be in their best shape, how frequently would you use it? How much would you use on a given day? Do you cycle it? What are some of the basic parameters around the product that you found for best effect?
So what we normally advise people is not to take more than 3 doses per day. Some athletes do go over that limit because, if you think about it, if you're working out and you are burning it constantly, it will
triathletes and stuff like that.
Exactly. So it really depends on your own discretion. Whether or not you take every day, I think it really depends on, first of all, like your financial situation, if you can afford it. And secondly is, do you need that boost? If on the days that you feel lethargic, you feel like you need that boost to go to the gym, you need that boost for the run, you need that boost to get through your day while you're fasting, then do it. I always advocate people like trial and error, because they know their body's the best. So if you find it best to use it just for running, just use that. If you don't find any benefit using it for weightlifting, then don't use that. If you find it useful for recovery, then keep at it. And the good thing about using it for recovery that I love is that recovery or effects of recovery is a sort of compounding effect. So over time, I get that sort of compounding benefit out of it, rather than just like one-off.
Is that because it's turning on some of these triggers inside the switches, if you will, in our body?
Yeah. So a study showed when taken with carb and protein after exercise, specifically turn on the leucine-mediated mTOR pathway, which is essential for protein synthesis. It also has shown increased glycogen resynthesis as well. So that helps with, giving you back the storage that you need if you're going for another hard day the next day. So there are quite a few like evidence already out there that really showed how taking it after workout may help accelerate that recovery process.
That's super cool. Where can people find out more about your research, your information, and everything that you guys are doing at HVM?
Generally, the website is quite informative. We've got a lot of citations. All the papers that claims all these benefits are also cited on the website as well.
What's the website for our listeners?
www.hvmn.com.
Yep.
And
I know you have a discount code. I think it's we'll put in the show notes. It's
yes, you guys
hvmn.me/awesomehealth. Put in code AHP for 10% discount. What are some of the things that they can find? I think they should dive. I think people would be blown away when they jump on the website and actually see all the data and research that's can lead you into making better decisions.
Yeah. I think on the website to start with, there's a good like introductory course, if you would, of what ketones are, what ketones do, why do we say ketones do X, Y, Z. And for me, you can always send an email to support@hvmn.com and ask questions specifically. Sometimes if the customer service teams feels like the question is too deep in the science, they will refer it back to me and I'll answer them personally. You can also follow me on social media, Instagram, Twitter at Latt Mansor, LATTMANSOR. Happy to, have a conversation there as well. So multiple channels, we are very open, transparent, very, we uphold this scientific integrity. And I always tell people, why spend time trying to compete with your competitors when you can spend time dwelling in the knowledge, learning more about it, and then spreading the knowledge.
Very cool. Any words for the future, what you plan on doing? Like where's this all going? What's the vision?
It's a big vision, but for exogenous ketones to be acknowledged as a fourth micronutrient.
Oh, wow. That's a very interesting. I know my business partner, Matt's been on a ketogenic diet for, I think, 25 plus years. And it's something that he's very much aligned with, is describing it as a different energetic.
It's like how people take whey protein, right? These days, it became a household item. Every kitchen has it, and people take it to supplement that increased protein intake that they need. Why not have, you need some ketones, and every household has it, and just have that boost. And hopefully that also drives the decrease in over sugar consumption as well. I think that would definitely make a big difference, because of my background and my research in diabetes and cardiovascular disease, that has always been very close to home, very close to my heart. And my passion is always trying to, do something and prevent chronic diseases. and also not only like outwards, but also inwards, like for myself, like what can I do to make sure I can age healthily, to make sure I will be functional and happy and healthy when I'm 80, 90 or whatever, if I live that long.
Beautiful vision. Dr. Mansor, thank you, Joe, so much for joining us today on the Awesome Health Podcast. Check out the website, HVMN, and the show notes are all here with your discount codes and all this stuff. Great stuff. And I wish you the best of luck. I think it will happen at some point that ketones will be categorized as its own nutrient category for energy metabolism. So keep up the great work. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
There you go, folks. So a little bit on ketones and Ketone IQ. By the way, I've tested a lot of different products. Ketone IQ is awesome. Give it a shot. I think you'll like it. I think it'll enhance your performance. And of course, it could keep your blood sugar a little bit lower, a little bit better. And we all need to do that if you look at the chronic challenges that occur from high blood sugar rates. It's an epidemic, and we need to reverse that trend, especially with our younger generation. That's all for today on the Awesome Health Podcast. I'm Wayti Lightheart from Bioptimizers. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: how to get away with eating sugar. Hey, look, sugar is normally one of the worst things for you. But let's be honest. I mean, we all cheat from time to time. And here's a little trick that will ensure your body benefits from the sugar. Now, before you eat or drink anything sweet, take 5 to 8 capsules of P3OM. The patented strain in the formula devours sugar so fast it literally doubles in the body every 20 minutes in the presence of sugar. That doesn't mean that you can or you should eat a bunch of sugar or sit around all day doing that. But on the days that you do cheat, or you go after one of those maybe meals that you wouldn't normally do, this ensures that you get something in your gut that eats the sugar. And it's not going to feed the bad guys or spike your blood glucose nearly as much. So to learn more about P3OM and its sugar-devouring and protein-digesting properties and how it can transform your gut and metabolism, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.